Ever wonder what really separates a good athlete from a truly great one? I mean, it's not always about who has the biggest muscles or the fastest time, right? Today, we're diving into that invisible force that powers amazing performances. We're going inside the mind of the athlete to check out the mental playbook that really defines a champion. Let's jump in. Just think about it for a second. We've all been there, whether you're at the gym, out for a run, or playing a game with friends. Some days you just feel like you're on fire, totally unstoppable. And other days, something's just off. So, what is that secret ingredient that makes all the difference? Yep, you guessed it. The answer, so often, isn't physical at all. It's all happening in the fascinating world of sport psychology. It's the science of how our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions are all tangled together when we get up and move our bodies. But to really get a grip on its power, we can't just stop at a cool idea. We need to see how the experts officially define this stuff. You know, what's so striking is just how simple the official definition is. This comes from the European Federation of Sport Psychology way back in 1996. They called it the study of mental processes in sport. That's it. It's all about what's going on upstairs while we're pushing our physical limits. And here's the thing, when they say sport, they're not just talking about Olympians or pro athletes. This field covers pretty much everything. Sure, competitive events, but also just playing for fun, your daily workout, or even that sometimes frustrating process of trying to learn a new skill, like swinging a golf club or a tennis racket. So this is really about all of us. Now, this might all seem like a pretty modern idea, but the roots of sports psychology actually go back over 100 years. So let's take a quick trip back in time and see how this whole field got started. So it all kicked off in 1898 with a guy named Norman Triplett. He just noticed something interesting. Cyclists rode faster when they were in groups versus when they were alone. He called it social facilitation. Fast forward to the 1920s, and the father of sports psychology, Coleman Griffith, opens the very first research lab. The field went a little quiet for a while, but then, bam, the 1960s hit and it just exploded worldwide. By the 80s, it was official, recognized as a real branch of science. Okay, so that's the history lesson. That brings us to today. What does a sports psychologist actually do? What's in their playbook? Well, it really boils down to three main gigs. First up, they're researchers, digging in and studying the mind to build up our knowledge. Second, they're educators. They teach these skills to athletes, coaches, you name it. And third, and this is the part we often think of, is the application. They work hands-on with athletes and teams to help them perform better, manage stress, stay motivated. It's this really cool cycle, you see. The research informs the teaching, and the teaching gets applied in the real world. All right, enough theory. Let's make all of this a little more real. We're going to dive into a case study and use all these different psychological ideas to understand one really simple human behavior. Okay, so let's meet John. On the surface, it's simple. John runs every single day. But psychology teaches us that the why behind what we do is where all the interesting stuff is hiding. So why does John really lace up those running shoes day after day? And this is where it gets super fascinating. If we look through a behavioral lens, we'd say he runs for the reward. He loses weight, he feels fitter, simple. But switch to a cognitive lens, and it's about his beliefs. He thinks running is good for his health. Now, a psychodynamic view, that might suggest he's unconsciously fighting a fear of getting older. What about humanistic? Maybe he feels like he's finally fulfilling some athletic potential he had when he was younger. Then there's the physiological angle, that classic runner's high from endorphins. And finally, from a social perspective, maybe he's just influenced by everyone around him saying it's important to stay fit. So what's the big point here? The crucial takeaway is that any of these could be true. Or even more likely, all of them could be true at the same time. Human motivation isn't a simple math problem. It's this rich, complex mix of factors, all working together at once. So now let's turn that lens away from our friend John and point it right back at ourselves. How can we use these exact same ideas to understand our own mental game? The most important tool you have is good, old-fashioned critical thinking. Don't just accept the first simple explanation for why you do what you do. Question it. Look for the evidence in your own life. Are you really motivated by a reward? Is it your beliefs? Is it social pressure? Just taking a moment to evaluate these ideas is the first step to mastering your own mind game. All right, let's wrap this all up with the key takeaways. First, remember, sports psychology is for everybody, not just the pros. Second, this is a legit science with over a century of history behind it. Third, as we saw with John, psychologists use a ton of different lenses to figure out behavior. And finally, the why that drives us is almost always way more complicated than it looks on the surface. And that leaves us with one last question for you to chew on. Think about your own habits, your own workouts, your goals. If you were the case study, what would a psychologist find? What's the real combination of factors that explains your motivation? What's really driving you?